Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a nutrient that some scientists believe is the missing link between our modern diet and a whole host of chronic diseases. We're talking about vitamin K2.
So you've probably heard of vitamin K, right? The one that's super important for blood clotting. But what if I told you it has a powerful sibling, K2, that plays a completely different, and you could argue, an even more critical role in your long-term health? Okay, let's get into it.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll start by solving the whole K1 versus K2 mystery. Then we'll explore its job as a guardian for your heart and a builder for your bones, figure out where you can actually find this stuff, and then we'll finish everything up with a simple, practical action plan. All right, first things first. We've got to clear up a common point of confusion, because this is where a lot of people get tripped up. Not all vitamin K is created equal, not by a long shot.
The whole vitamin K story really kicks off way back in 1929. Scientists figured out its role in blood coagulation, which is just the fancy term for clotting. But while the whole vitamin family is important, the two main players, K1 and K2, have very different jobs in your body.
And this right here, this lays it out perfectly. You've got K1 from things like leafy greens, and its main gig is handling blood clotting. Then there's K2, which comes from totally different sources, like animal foods and fermented foods, and has a completely different job, managing calcium. But here's the kicker. Look at the bottom line. Our diets are loaded with K1, but we get very little K2. And that imbalance, well, that's central to our whole story today.
So how exactly does managing calcium make K2 a hero for your heart? Well, it's all about making sure that mineral ends up in the right place and, more importantly, not in the wrong one.
This is the absolute key. We're all told to get more calcium for our bones, and that's true. But when that same calcium builds up in our arteries, it causes them to harden, and that's a huge risk factor for heart disease. This is exactly where K2 steps in. It's literally like a traffic cop for calcium, making sure it gets deposited in your bones and stays the heck out of your arteries.
And hey, this isn't just some nice theory. The research here is really compelling. Take this, for example. A massive meta-analysis looked at the diets of over 222,000 people, and what they find? A super clear link. People with a higher intake of vitamin K had a significantly lower risk of coronary heart disease.
So the evidence strongly suggests K2 plays this really protective role for our hearts. The whole mechanism makes sense, and the data shows a strong correlation. But it's really important to be clear here. These studies show a link, not definitive proof. Science is still calling for more of those long-term trials to really confirm these findings.
Now, K2 doesn't just play defense, keeping calcium out of the wrong places. It also plays offense by actively guiding it into the right one, your bones.
And this is where we start talking about osteoporosis, a condition that literally means porous bones. It makes your bones dangerously weak and brittle. This is a huge public health issue, and as it turns out, K2 is a key player in the fight against it.
This slide shows you exactly how it works. Think of K2 as the foreman on a construction site for your bones. It goes in and activates two key worker proteins. Once K2 gives them the signal, these proteins grab onto calcium and literally cement it directly into your bone matrix. The result? A stronger, denser skeleton. It's pretty amazing.
And we have solid evidence from controlled studies to back this up. A 2022 analysis, for example, found that K2 supplements had a really positive effect on bone strength. But, science is always evolving. Some newer reviews have shown some conflicting results, which just tells us that more research is needed to get the full picture.
Okay, so if K2 is this important for our heart and our bones, where is it hiding? Because as we saw earlier, it's much rarer in our modern diets than its cousin, K1.
I mean, this chart really says it all. A typical diet gives us about 9 times more vitamin K1 than K2. This huge imbalance highlights exactly why we need to be more intentional about seeking out K2 sources if we want its unique benefits.
Now, you might be wondering, well, can't my body just convert all that K1 from my salad into K2? And the answer is, sort of. But the process is incredibly inefficient. You simply cannot eat enough spinach to convert it into the amount of K2 your body actually needs. Eating it directly is just way better.
So, to get K2 directly, we need to look at two main categories: certain animal foods and fermented foods. For animal sources, we're talking about things like high-fat dairy from grass-fed cows, egg yolks, and liver. And in the fermented category, the undisputed champion is natto,
That's a Japanese dish of fermented soybeans, but you'll also find it in things like sauerkraut and miso.
Okay, let's bring all this information together into a practical action plan you can actually use.
And K2 doesn't work alone. For a real health boost, you want to pair it with vitamin D. They have a synergistic effect, which just means they're a powerful team. Vitamin D helps you absorb calcium from your gut, and then vitamin K2 takes over to direct that calcium to your bones. They're the perfect 1-2 punch for bone health.
So what about safety? Well, for most people, vitamin K2 is considered very safe with no known toxicity level. But, and this is critical, so please listen carefully, if you are taking a blood-thinning medication like warfarin, you absolutely must speak with your doctor before increasing your intake. Any sudden change in vitamin K can interfere with these medications, so professional guidance is essential.
So the main takeaway here is this. K1 and K2 are not interchangeable. They are two different vitamins with two distinct and vital jobs. You need K1 for healthy blood clotting, and you need K2 to manage calcium for strong bones and a healthy heart. It's not one or the other, you need both.
So, we've seen how this unsung hero, vitamin K2, acts as the body's calcium traffic cop, protecting our arteries and strengthening our bones. The question for you is, could this be the missing link in your own health puzzle? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.